I never imagined making a sourdough bread like this could actually work. Today I'll show you a reimagined way of making sourdough bread. I have created the monster! The method I developed is much easier, much more accessible, and way more versatile than everything that's out there. It works with every flour, even gluten-free flour, and it's going to reward you with absolutely super delicious and stunning sourdough bread. Now the method is going to feel a little bit strange for you seasoned sourdough bakers, but I can assure you that you're going to love it. This has been such an amazing experience. It's a beta version, but let me show you. In the last video I made a really simple but super delicious bread directly on the stove. The recipe was surprisingly simple. Flour, water, sourdough starter and salt. I would just let that ferment and form tiny bread links and then make them directly over a fire. It was a back to basics bread, likely how our ancestors have made bread. It was super eye-opening. After making this, a crazy thought started to grow inside of my head. But only after making my next video on how to make a sourdough starter it really made click. I think it might work. I explained that the sourdough starter is pretty much just a gigantic dough. And the dough is pretty much just a gigantic sourdough starter. Maybe except the salt. So why do we actually go through the whole process of making sourdough bread? Why don't we directly bake our sourdough starter? It's a gigantic dough, isn't it? Why haven't I thought of this before? Now it's gonna get a little strange. But what happened next was totally mind-blowing. The first attempt was my alpha version. It gets better on the second try. I just used my regular sourdough starter and placed it on a piece of parchment paper. It took me quite a little bit of effort because I'm mostly good at... Wait, what am I good at? Anyways, I threw it in my pan and covered it with a lid. This way the bread would start to bake from the top. The steam stays inside. I flipped the dough over and let it continue to bake. Because of the high water content that's inside of your starter or inside of the dough, everything is going to evaporate. You'll have a super fluffy bread in the end. I screwed up the shape a little bit and I burned it a little bit too much, but my interest was sparked. Now, let's go slightly crazy and switch from alpha to beta version and do the unthinkable. It smells so good. And I have a great idea what to eat together with this. That was okay, but now let's try this one more time, and this time we will up our challenge. Let's try with a gluten-free corn flour, spelt, and rye one more time. I'm gonna be using my regular starter again to set up the different doughs. Well, not the doughs, the starters. The corn flour is not gonna be 100% gluten-free because this contains gluten, but you could also totally make a completely new sourdough starter with gluten-free corn flour. That will work. I'm just a little too lazy now. So 3 more starters and let's test again tomorrow what's gonna happen. Good learning here, this flour doesn't have the consistency I want. That's the corn flour. So I'm just gonna be adding a bit more water slowly. I made the doughs, but I had another crazy idea that I wanted to test. I just made another stiff starter and I rolled it out like a gigantic pizza. And we're gonna let this ferment overnight and try to bake it like this without touching the dough in the morning. What's gonna happen? What are we gonna get? And to make sure the dough doesn't dry out, I'm gonna place a glass bowl on top, plus the parchment paper so I can directly bake it like this. I don't have to move the dough. I'm hoping for a super fluffy dough. Let's see. Gluten Morgan. I hope you see what I did there. Okay, let's remove the bowl from our rolled out sourdough starter. This looks interesting. Slightly puffy here too in some areas. Let's see what's gonna happen when we bake this. But before, let's also check out the other doughs. Our corn flour starter. It didn't increase as much in size, but don't worry, this is gonna be amazing. The rye starter, looking good, increased only a little bit in size, but this is also gonna turn into an amazing bread. And last but not least, the spelt starter. And you see it looks nice and bubbly. Exactly the same way you want a starter to look. So I could be using this to make a bread now, but we're gonna try to bake it in the pan one more time. I'm gonna be using parchment paper again. And of course, this is just a beta recipe, so I still need to do a lot more iterations. If you think there's something better we could use for this, please do share it in the comments. Now with the spatula, I will remove the dough and place it here. I'm trying to not touch the dough too much because I will be removing a lot of gas from the dough, which is what I don't want. I want the dough to be as fluffy as possible. Oh, and yes, you can nicely feel how puffy the dough is when touching it with the spatula. Oh, and see that? This is perfect. Rye is just always such a sticky mess. What works wonders for rye is to use a little bit of water. That way the dough won't stick. I'm just trying to get this into a nice, slightly rounder shape so it doesn't look so bad like in the first version. I'm being careful here because I don't want the dough to degas too much. Perfect. I'm not trying to have the starter too thick or else it will take too long to bake in the pan. Perfect. And now next up, the corn. Oh yes. It feels nice and puffy too, but you definitely directly see that there is no gluten. Just check out how crumbly this dough is. But after baking, this is going to stay together. And last, our spelt dough. It has such a liquid consistency. It's really liquid, but with a little bit of water, I'm able to tame it. So I hoped. Looking good though. Now there are two options. I could bake them directly like this in a pan, or I could wait just maybe 30 or 60 minutes so that they will puff up a little bit again. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Sort of the proofing stage that you always have when you make bread. So I degas them a bit. Now they will become a bit more active. They will produce more CO2 and I'm hoping for a fluffness monster. Around 30 minutes later and after my photo session, it's now time to bake all of them. And I'm so excited to show you what's gonna happen, especially with this gluten-free version. I'm going to be using my cast iron again, but every pan works. I'm starting with spelt and corn flour. I'm setting the pan to medium heat. No preheating is required. I highly recommend you to place a lid on top. This sort of simulates a Dutch oven, and while the water is evaporating, it's gonna stay inside and will start to cook the top part nicely. This way we can flip everything around and hopefully it's not gonna stick. 3 minutes later, and check this out, how nicely this already has started to puff. So I'm gonna bake it a little bit longer. I want the top part to be cooked more and then we'll flip it over. While everything is cooking, let's start to make a little bit of a sauce that we can eat alongside this also bread. I'm gonna be adding garlic, almost, some rosemary, and some sea salt. I'm just using a bit more salt because the bread itself, it's just a starter, doesn't contain any salt. After a few more minutes, let's try to flip this over now. You can see the top part is already cooked, so it's no longer going to stick. Now we can also remove the parchment paper, I hope. Nice! Oh no. Yes, you can see the source of the heat is in the center, so I have to rotate them a few more times. But I think you get the point. Now that all the herbs have been ground, time to add a bit of olive oil. Oil has been finished and just look at this goodness. Garlic, salt, oil, rosemary. So simple and so delicious. And now comes the wheat one, which I am certainly the most excited about. Are we gonna create a gigantic fluff bread? We'll see in a bit. 2 minutes in and this happened. I'm gonna try to flip it over already. What is happening here? I have created a monster. It now exploded against the lid. Yeah, so this is definitely a problem right now, that it only cooks inside of the middle. So I really need to rotate this more often. Oh, but it's so soft and fluffy. This is amazing. And the wheat one turned out crazy. Look at that, it's looking so good. I'm gonna wrap all of them in a towel now because I don't want them to dry out. This way they're gonna stay nice and soft. That's the secret of corn tortillas. If you want them to stay nice and soft, this is definitely a good trick. Number 1, the rye version. Like the last time, a little bit better, but here I screwed this up. So I baked it for a bit too long. The spelt version, looking really nice, and just see all those bubbles here. This is gonna be super soft. Then our wheat version. I think I also cooked it maybe just a little bit too long, but it's still nice and soft in some areas too. So good. And the one you have been waiting for, the corn version, the almost gluten-free version. I just didn't use the gluten-free starter, else this would have been completely gluten-free. And just check this out, it looks so amazing, like a gigantic fluffy tortilla. I'm in love. They all just look so good. Let's cut them into tiny pieces now because they need salt. They don't have any salt yet, and then we're gonna be adding our sauce. The wheat one definitely turned out a bit too crunchy in the center. Now let's add our sauce. And ready are our garlic bites. Let's try the corn-based one. I'm so excited. Mmm. 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 Mm-hmm. Wow. It tastes like a gigantic fluffy tortilla. It's a bit sour too. Garlicky, rosemary, that oil, it's amazing. And now next up, which I'm super excited about, the spelt one. Wow, it's so fluffy. This is incredible. And then last, the wheat-based one. But the thicker ones definitely win, I gotta say. Oh, and of course, I said the last, but the rye one, which I had before. Rye just has such an amazing, hearty taste to it. This was amazing. This has been such an eye-opening experience. In fact, this is now exactly what I do with my discard starter. I bake it directly. It makes such an amazing bread. The longer you bake, the less sour it's going to be. Now I need your help. I'm currently in the process of writing a book, a completely free book, because I believe that this information on my channel should be accessible to everyone around the world for free. I'm asking for your financial support to make my dream come a reality. The first money is going to go into the first chapter of writing the book. The book is going to be a complete game changer. It's going to be a framework that you can use to bake every sourdough recipe there is. It's going to provide you all that information you need to master making bread. I'm going to be sharing the link to the book in the description of the video. Thank you very much. Seriously, I feel like such a beggar asking money for this book. But I also don't want to sell it. I want it to be completely free. So every support is highly appreciated.